the goal of this is for us to bring out some practices and ways that I think we've got people over here. If we can, I don't know how many signed up. Jonathan didn't say, so. I'll be getting rid of this soon, too. Can you turn down the volume here, and then I'll. That's good, Alex. I can always take it off then. Yeah. Live and move and have being. Joining us. Collaboration. Yes. Good. We're happy. Feel okay, great. Right? I think we've got. How many do you have in there? Okay. Well, they heard it was me, and then they didn't come. They're going to need it for the. We did. We already did. Yeah, we did that. Yeah, no, I didn't want to disturb them. Okay. All right. Good afternoon. So supposedly we had 17, but they heard I was leading, and then they abandoned. They didn't want to accompany. So let's begin with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Loving and gracious God, we thank you for the gift of this time together. We ask that you may bless and guide our collaboration with one another as we discuss and reflect on how we can accompany even more effectively, more fruitfully, and to build up the community of faith. Christ our Lord. Amen. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Okay, great. First things first, I think it would be good if, because much of the time together is going to be conversation among you rather than me giving some lengthy presentation. So if you could just, if you haven't already introduce yourselves to each other, what diocese you're from. I'm assuming that you're all diocesan directors. This particular breakout was geared for diocesan directors particularly. Okay. So take a moment to just introduce yourselves and what your position is and what you're working on the all ministry. No, it's not. It's purposely turned down because it's for the live stream. It's not for you. It's for that. Yeah, no. It's not just so we can.
border along California, Idaho, Montana.
Okay. Everybody have a chance to introduce yourselves, one another. Okay. So this particular session is actually conflating two pieces of Living as Missionary Disciples, the Bishop's document and the resource for evangelization. It's a short read, it's about 80-some pages. It is really the programmatic. It's not really programmatic. It's meant to be the methodology by which we're going about forming missionary disciples. In the methodology of Christ, encounter, accompany, community, send. Based off of Evangelium Gaudium. And the company community part, if you use any of the materials for World Youth Day, there was a section there that talked about encounter, company, send. Okay? Go straight. And that got broken out by the bishops. I'm a consultant for the Committee on Evangelization and Catechesis and work on this document, and the Catholic Apostolate Center did as well. We as consultants, the bishops, and then went through the whole conference. The bishops particularly added the community part. Gabriella really broke out wonderfully the accompaniment part. So I'm not going to dwell too much on that. That's really most of the majority of the points that she made would be the points that I would be making. The community part, and the reason why the bishops focused in and zoned in on that, so as that's the director just today, is because of that disconnect that often happens with people in general, not just simply the subset young adults, but people in general with parish. And yet, parish is still the main focus of faith formation in the United States. Unlike in Europe or even Latin America, it is still the place where we have the most moment of impact, whether it's in the Eucharistic liturgy, the Mass, or when we're going outward, in helping people be formed so as to go out. When we're dwelling on this whole, wringing our hands about the disaffiliated, well, if we form missionary disciples, and if people were actually living as missionary disciples, they would be the ones who would be going to their family, their friends, their workplace, their school, and so forth, to assist them and accompany them and walk with them, hopefully, to the community of faith we call church. But then to go out, which will be the next part, sent. That's that missionary part, or apostles part, as is in the decree of the apostle and laity. So this piece of accompaniment and community is one in which we, coming from the perspective that I am as director of the Catholic Apostolate Center, also until yesterday I was provincial of my community, the Catholic Brothers and Brothers, my province, and dealing with and going around the country presenting and hearing from different dioceses and working with different dioceses, there is that unfortunate reality, which I mentioned in my homily, where we hit the program button because that works. That's worked for us. It doesn't really work anymore. Gabriella mentioned it doesn't work in the same way anymore. it might be gateway, but oftentimes it's fleeting. And it's that ongoing accompaniment which hard, and when you say it's like as a diocesan director, like how am I supposed to do that? And pastors are looking at you and saying, you need to give me all the answers of how to deal with it, but I won't change anything, including my parish secretary, who will be nasty to people who will contact us. Pope Francis has a great line related to that about the parish secretary and how intimidating the parish secretary is. And it's nothing against the parish. It's that's the gateway person, and they're used to being sometimes beat up and expectations and so forth. So we have to be compassionate and understanding. But that's often that disconnect, because emails don't get answered, or then a young adult who's well formed, who arrives at the parish and then is patted on the head and treated like a child, and then says, "I'm like this. It's crazy. We're going to a website or do my own events, or worse." That's it. I'm out of here when it comes to church. They're not really connected well. It's really a problem. What we're seeing is this ongoing reality, and then as diocesan directors, one of the things that we have, that we've tried to bring to the fore, and I know this has been an ongoing conversation, in that it becomes a key collaboration becomes the parishes and then those volunteers. So, for example, for years now I've worked with the Knights of Columbus, but I've worked in the College Councils program, particularly across the street at Catholic University. I was a chaplain there for 11 years in the College Councils program. Many of the young men who were part of that program would then go into parishes, or they'll go into the Knights themselves, and they'll get involved with the Knights, and they run into the same problem that we do with the parishes. They don't know what to do with them. They don't know what to do with people who then have a formation, and are seeking for more, and are seeking to contribute more. And so one of the pieces that are seeing, is this disconnect, because dioceses will often be putting on all these other programmatic kinds of things, and that becomes the majority of what an office does. And the parishes are saying, we want resourcing, but sometimes that resourcing becomes just simply, we want you to do it. So how to bridge that to create co-responsibility, to develop greater co-responsibility around this. We use what's called 7 C's of Christ-centered collaboration. There's cards over there that you can go and take a look at. But the point is Christ is at the center of it all. And ultimately we come to co-responsibility for the mission of Christ in His church. But that requires a company, that requires a community that's willing to go a little more, to be more widely open and available. So that's one of the things that we see. Another thing that we see is that there is this tendency to not only throw programs and things, but just simply look quantitatively rather than qualitatively. So, for example, people will want reporting from diocesan directors often, or from parishes. How many people get? And if you come back and say, I had a program and I had 10 people, get one of those reactions. But qualitatively, what went on? And how can we get to that qualitative piece? Because real accompaniment, we see this in the preparatory document for the Synod, we see it in the way Pope Francis talks about it. Qualitatively, what happened? Consider Jesus. 12, really, he worked very closely with 3. Peter, James, and John. And out of that community that was built, that started to go even wider, and then particularly the women who were part of that community as well, who are faithful right to the inclusive of the cross, that community then just spread from there. It built upon itself. It wasn't and it was left for people to be creative, to try different things, to do different aspects. That is what we're talking about. But that's hard then to report back to a superior in a diocese. So there's also the collaborating up, meaning good followership, meaning helping a supervisor or people who are in diocesan offices or even a bishop understand more fully. And taking a bishop's document and showing him accompaniment, they help a bishop sometimes. You'd be surprised. Because then it does grow upon itself. If that accompaniment is done well, like with the two who were on the road, who ran back to the community gathered. The community was in the upper room. Okay? The community was gathered. The community was gathered. So that being the case, what I'd like you to do now is take some time, take about 10 minutes to what do you see? Then we'll move to the judge part. What are the needs? So we'll do a report back of what you see. We're no taker. I'm sorry, your name is Christina from the Diocese of Reno. Christina will take that part down. Then we'll go back to what are the needs? Not just the landscape. We'll do landscape. Then we'll do judge, needs, report back. Then we'll do act. Okay? So it's really your work, your collaborative work, and the work of the Holy Spirit that's going to be the fruit of this session rather than my blathering on any further. Okay? But I'll keep time. I'll facilitate. Also there are people who are online. We'll have to see how we can engage them because they engage among themselves, by the way. They're talking and chatting all through these main sessions. It's like you have another table or two of people who are at these main sessions and also at this breakout at the moment. Okay? So take about, let's see, it's 3:15. So take 15 minutes. Okay? Take 15 minutes. I know it's not a lot of time, and we'll see. We'll do a check and see where you are in 15 minutes. And then if you need a little bit more time, we can probably get a little bit more. Thank you. All right. The question is, how to accompany and build communities more effectively in collaboration with people in the parish? So the expectation is you do it all. Or am I off base? Okay? How to bridge that now to the parishes and the volunteers who are working with young adults, including young adults with young adults. What do you see when it comes to that collaboration? What do you see when it comes to that collaboration? So one thing you might see is, look to me, I go, young adults, and look to me. But then what else do you see? And then we'll get to the needs. What do you see? Let's just pick a basic landscape. Okay?
Yeah, the Faith in Action newsletter. Do you get it? Here, I'll forward it to you. Do you get it, sister? All right. You're welcome. Well, I'm just excited. I'm so excited for her.
And she did a song. She wrote a song.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt. Where are you at this point? Did you? Okay, got all the way around. We're good. Okay. How about you're way ahead in the process. Okay. How about if we get some reporting back on what do you see? What do you see? Okay.
Okay, I just noticed on this side, some things that came out of our discussion, this idea of keeping people happy, like trying to go in and create space or give people kind of what they need, even though you know it could possibly just be short term, but kind of getting that function done because we're building trust. The reality that parishes don't have the resources and the time, yet there are a lot of young adults who are enthusiastic, and so you'll get a couple of these like flagship parishes that are kind of on fire and doing a lot of things, and then you look out at the larger landscape and you realize that there's still a lot of work still to be done. This idea that we continually understand that from a diocesan perspective that we need funneling back into the parishes, yet we know that there might not be sound structure at the parish, and kind of figuring out and navigating how do we begin to build that. Like, I think the question is like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Like, who begins, where do you begin to invest your energy first? There's also a lot of saturation in some of our areas where we're dealing with, in some areas, anywhere between like 10 or 20 young adult offerings or opportunities a night, and for a young adult, how overwhelming that can be and how to best navigate that for them. And so, like in New York, they have a questionnaire system where somebody fills out a questionnaire and then get kind of personalized response about what to do. And also, someone at our table was talking about the disconnect that she came really from parish ministry and realized that, well, diocesan leadership kind of kept coming in and throwing a lot of party opportunities and just disappeared without little follow-up and little formation. But then we do a lot of consulting. We're really trying to work on this accompaniment by working and ministering to leaders one-on-one.
Anything to add in from the table?
That was great.
How about over here?
What'd she say?
Summarize or
We got the notes.
Okay, better. We talked about how it's important to, that there's a model of bringing people together so that we can catechize them. And a lot of times what happens with within diocesan events, and that the ideal is that we really do want to move back into the parish, and go back into the larger parish. And the mission of the larger parish, not just within necessarily the adult ministry group, but within the life of the whole life of the parish. And when we listen to young adults, like that's one of the things that we've all been doing, the immediate thing that they do is want to listen is we want this, versus trying to help them broader and deeper message and with discipleship. And gathering at all these events sometimes take away from the diocesan office's ability to be able to really serve the company and walk in the young adult leaders. And then we talked about a change of terminology or a paradigm shift is needed from group to ministry and deification.
What do you mean by that?
Do you want to share a little bit about that?
When we say group, we're talking again about getting people together doing activities. When you say ministry, it's how do we empower people to go out and be part of the large community. I'm using the word group because it's used group, it's used ministry group. So immediately we think of getting people together and having little gatherings rather than empowering people to go out and do ministry. So you have to be very attentive to how we talk.
And then I'll also want to interject Sean's example. Share that with you, the example of you going into a parish. Yeah, like, this to me is like the quintessential ministry activities, group mentality versus engaging in the parish. I think that's the story too.
We have a suburban parish that I've been consulted several times in the past few years, and they look to the other suburban and urban parishes that have the big, vibrant adult groups, and they keep on to ask why can't we get young adult ministry going in that parish. We really don't understand. Half our parish council, maybe half of the young people, half the people meeting are vacation Bible school or more for 2030, half of our catechists are in their 30s, half of our lectors and ministers are in their 40s. Why can't we get young adult ministry going in the parish? Like, well, yeah, we don't have this group model that's working well in these parishes. But the group, the focus is there, is this end goal that we have. Young adults, like 20s and 30s, clearly feel welcome in your community. And the overall, but what blows my mind is that conversation you have once, if every 3 years or so, when the parish council cycles out, the new parish council comes on and is wrestling with that same question, and looking through our parishes, or seeing these groups, and they're wondering why they can't engage in something like that. Whereas all the other parishes are looking to them and wondering why the groups aren't necessarily getting the adults engaged, in all the ministries, other ministries in parish.
And awful, particularly awful what Sister was talking about. Dr. Davis, Dr. Moen Davis has been facilitating the online folks. Any thoughts from the group there? I'm sure there's been lots of thoughts.
It actually has been lots of thoughts. It took me a moment to catch up with the stream. But one of the things that came up is be consistent in identifying the who. So who are you talking about, and then what is their cause, so that you have a clear understanding of what they want, and that the who is not the pastor or the parish staff, but the who is the young adults themselves. They also went on to talk about moving from a lessons learned perspective and trying to incorporate everything into one program, that particular approach doesn't work, that we need to pay attention to what makes us Catholic. And they used an example of how in Theology on Tap, where they have a guest speaker that talks about specific teachings of the church and things like that, but maybe something that is being taken for granted is the fact of why is the Mass structured the way it is. And that's not a common understanding for young adults or for older adults either, that we need to talk about what is this structure and what is the purpose of the Mass, and that not everybody understands it as public worship of our God, but as an activity that we participate in. And so not understanding this wider trajectory. I'll keep you all posted.
Okay, thank you. No, those are, and thank you for all that you shared. And really that does lift up a number of pieces that then help to move us toward the needs. What are the needs that are there? Because if we're saying that there's broader approach, if so much time was pulling away from walking from the journey about and journeying with people because of gathering and events, but also this other thing about one size doesn't fit all. And sometimes we want to throw that group mentality. One of the things is young adult ministry youth group with booze? Is that the model? And while there are those that engage in aspects, that group mentality becomes then something that can also be closed. And so how do we open so there seems to be a need in those areas. So what we'd like to do now is to shift into and take about 10 minutes on the needs part. What are the needs that you see? The needs that you think need to be addressed, and then we'll go into the how. Just a few pieces of how. We know we're not going to be able to answer everything, but it's not that often you probably get a chance to be with colleagues from different dioceses, different parts of the country, to be able to just see often how similar some of the issues and situations are, but also then the reality of your local situation and the response to it is going to be different. And so while we can come again, we can't head into a one-size-fits-all. So what are some, lift up in this session, this next portion, over the next 10 minutes, lift up some of the needs. Try and be targeted. Take a moment to jot down first. Okay? Take a couple minutes to jot down first, and then share what you think those needs are.
Father, clarification? Oh, I bet my mic is still live. The needs of young adults or the needs for sustaining the collaboration?
The needs for sustaining collaboration. Yeah.
Thank
So just to clarify, the needs for sustaining collaboration. So in order to collaborate more effectively, what are those needs? Okay. All right. Sorry about that. I'm sorry I wasn't clear. But the whole framework of this is about how can we collaborate more effectively.
So, how about if we, Dr. Davis, give some feedback? So we've got basically 2 more tables online. There's 10 people. So it's just so fill out the room. You know.
To sustain the collaboration, they threw out some things like trust, listening, dialogue, consistency, commitment, catechesis, mileage, and time. And so to those, I asked who needs to do what, and it was both needs to do that. They need to share in this. Mileage is because distance between parishes, that if we're going to meet young adults where they are, we have to go to them, and some of these dioceses are quite spread out. In terms of time, Lisa asked, how do we get people to prioritize so that collaboration can happen? The question that I had asked is, how do we present our ideas as things that would replace others so that they don't have to figure out how to fit something else into their schedule, but how do they shift and it replaces? Chris came back to catechesis, and then Lisa came back with, we need to market and sell. So we have to understand that we might have to use some business type of things in order to get the word out. And then the last thing was respecting where each other is coming from. So.
Great, excellent. Okay, how about over here?
So at our table here, we talked about the realities are very different. I know, for example, I was sharing within my own diocese that we're at the basic level of just encountering even within our leaders. But we also talked about how it seems like our formation can seem so basic at sometimes, but we need to remember that we do need to be basic, and we need to also make sure that we are multifaceted in that formation, thinking of like human, history, scriptural, societal, capital, and then also reminding them that part of going out in our formation. And then we discussed how we challenge our people to go out further, like we just brought up that question. And what does it mean to go out to the edge of the world? Like, we need to challenge for that. And then we discussed how in one diocese they withdrew synod and to bring back restored order, which then brings up the question, how do you keep engaged? And this goes further into young adults about how do we really make participants keep not just living out their life, but living to live missionary disciples, and collaboration going on in terms of communication, consultation, small local retreats is happening, but how do we move more to an accompanying model is a challenge.
How about over here?
I think when you're looking at accompaniment and how particular it is, as we saw in the first part, with what we observed, we echoed a lot of what it means to be transformed, but it's a lot putting for leaders to encounter Christ and how that transforms them, because if we all move towards this missionary discipleship model, right, if you want to utilize a model, that means we're sharing the responsibility of accompaniment, and that was echoed through this group, that it can't just be the feel and sometimes the awkward, but the relatable and the charismatic that who an entire community that draws one another in and towards Christ.
Great. Okay. Now the next step is what are some of the ways to work on this collaboration issue? What are some ways of responding? So, for example, not to give a sales pitch, but Gabriella is taking our program, Catholic Apostolate Center, from practicing Catholics to apostles on mission, and gathering people who have been identified who could be mentors, and then go back to their parish and then do that formation in the parish, which is meant to be a formation program that includes mentorship as well and accompaniment as part of it. So it's building out, but the diocesan director is doing it, as she said, 75 here, 75 there, and then you go forth and bear fruit. So that's an example of how to collaborate, but without doing it all yourself. But saying, okay, now we're sharing this responsibility, we're providing you with tools and resources and something that you can then bring back and then carry that formation forward.
I have a follow-up question on
Yeah.
that idea. Is she doing that in a parish-based system, where those people that she's brought together are going to be going back to their parishes,
Yes.
or regional, or how?
Yeah, my understanding is that these are people who have been identified, who will be identified, who are then going to go back to the parishes and bring things there, but still have the connection, basically the customer service of the diocesan director, as well as then us as a center, to help with that process. Because, so there's collaboration becomes wider than just even simply the diocesan resources. That's just one example, and again, not a sales pitch, it's just one example. So since you brought it up, so what are some of the other, what are some possibilities in terms of that? So take, again, this time you have 10 minutes, and then we're almost to 4:15, please, because you're really having a very enriching conversation, as have the folks online. So we'll continue on, and it's now a couple minutes before 4. So at 4:09, we'll stop, and then another report back, and we'll finish. 4:15.
There's an organization that's just kind of started. That's igniting.
What's going on, Mox?
Daddy, Daddy. Why don't you tell him? Today, all of the kids got a special present for the end of the year party. The last day is Monday, but some kids only come on Wednesday. So they got a bucket with different things in there. And Augie, Miss Debbie knows Augie very well, gave Augie a bug collecting kit. It has a little net and a tweezers and a little container to hold it with a magnifying glass on it.
Oh, wow, Augie, that's so cool.
Very, very excited.
Oh, Augie, that you're going to be able to catch all the bugs you want.
Isn't that right?
I was not Catholic, the 70 years of people that were there was probably the reason through a leader of the Catholic but I did not even know existed until I come to see. Yeah, they have all these together and some people are right for the organized themselves all over. And but when I talked to them, they were like, wow, we never knew that some people were there. So I think that you aren't lying. But I come down to kind of, and then it's like talking about it and the yeah. But now that my work is going on, I'm trying to follow them. Plug it in. And then I'm also like, oh my gosh, the relationship built
I have to check my own in the interest of efficiency to do small work together.
Very good about feeling that. Yeah, so, one of my biggest growth support, my real,
So we've got a minute left.
Very controversial. We have the parish closed.
Okay, let's come back. We had, certainly if we had more time, there will be, I can hear there will be additional things that could come up, but I appreciate all the sharing. If we can do some report back on this part, how about if we start here, this table, report back for our note taker. Sorry, boom, yeah.
Partnering with organizations that, where there are mission focused already, so we had brought up Catholic missionary disciples and social missionaries, but also even just finding ways to really cultivate an authentic community among our leadership, whether they be staff or volunteer, and reminding ourselves that it just takes a lot of time to cultivate and build that. And if possible, where we can, to financially invest where it's possible. So whether or not that's kind of whining and dining them a little bit to remind them that you care and that and building a relationship that way, and or finding ways to offer opportunities for spiritual direction, creating retreats specifically for them, but really kind of narrowing in on your leaders and your volunteers, ensuring that they understand that your role really is to care for them and the relationship with Christ, not just to be authoritative arm, but really this extension of Christ.
How about over here?
Yeah. We discussed how empowering parishes to engage young parish. So there to be able to continue to join on a larger level at the diocese, so that we can walk in a company of smaller leaders. We talked about that the synod that one of the dioceses have participated, or the timing has inspired parishes wanting to teach a lot more about young adults. And so that means a lot more educating, advocating as much as possible out to all the parishes and getting out. At a large scale, how do we get out that word about young adults and serving young adults, but also being a young adult friendly community, parish council, and then also, we briefly went kind of backwards a little bit, talk about the model of the Catholic company community, and that oftentimes we want to be community support companies. So keeping that in mind, as we're looking at best practices, but really making sure that we're emphasizing that a company empowering how we're using the other.
One of the areas, aside on that, one of the areas that gets often short shrift is the encounter piece. And we might be very good at the stuff of community, so the programs, this, that, the other thing. We see that as accompanying, but that encounter piece becomes kind of lost. We're very good at church, but not necessarily very good at Jesus sometimes. So that part becomes a bit of a challenge. Dr. Davis?
So we talked about the difference between the apostles and the disciples. The apostles who had direct formation, and then disciples coming and going, and what does that mean now for us who are, considered disciples, and how we relate in that way. In Cleveland, they have a coalition that is made up of representatives from diocesan offices, religious community, and young adults who are active in young adult ministry, and they meet 4 times a year. I'm getting more information about how that fleshes out, whether or not they go over a theme, or whether or not they just meet and then they work things out. Someone talked about shock therapy in the sense that perhaps we need to have more retreats or encounters, talking about encounters, where people are actually fed the truth. And once they get the truth, they will want more, but understanding that we still are meeting them where they are. And then we started talking about there's this sense of preaching to the choir, and that and sometimes do we get stuck with, if we're preaching to the choir, do we need to say anything? And so my comment to them in that was sometimes the choir needs an awakening, and so if that's the case, then how is it that we're paying attention to the choir director, and what is the choir director giving people to make sure that they are able to have their own conversion in order to help facilitate conversion from other people. And then I now have information about there are 7 goals to the coalition, and they've broken into task groups: curating and developing, reaching out to adults, sustainability, and one who coordinates the day-to-day tasks of the coalition.
Great. And it's in that, so there's a collaboration that's going on with that type of coalition. And a number of guys who have those kinds of groupings that come together and share what they're doing and where they can have the greater impact. But it seems that what seems to be listed out is this leadership formation, and the aspect that is about encounter with, particularly in terms of, Dr. Davis has talked about that ongoing conversion that is a lifelong, and we see that in Gaudete Cultate, again, lifelong process. It's not something that just is going to happen, as Pope Francis talked about, but, this is going on now. We talk about metanoia, we talk about the ongoing conversion. This is a lifelong process, and helping people to, particularly leaders, to recognize that is the case, and that encounter continues to deepen. And then how does that accompanying go on within the community, and then, as we're going to be talking about over the next session, going out, rather than just staying within the comfort zone. And those leaders become the key people to help for that going out. You were forming them in your upper room, the upper room that you helped to create, that the Spirit is permeating it. And then they go out, and then they go out, and then they go out. On that note, I want to thank you for your great participation in this, and look forward to the rest of the summer. Thank you very much.